to the Rescue, Chapter 5. The snowstorm stopped at daybreak, but before then Cousin Dinky flew his glider into the storm 3 times more looking for his mother. He went back and forth between the Biggs house and Dr. Zigger's house, trying to see through the darkness to the ground. Finally, just before daybreak, he spotted a parachute in the woods between the 2 houses. When Cousin Dinky got back to the Biggs house, he told the Littles what had happened. They all sat down at the dining room table to talk over what should be done. Mrs. Little served hot cocoa that Mr. Little had taken from the Biggs. The Littles got everything they needed from the Biggs when the Biggs weren't looking. The cocoa was left over from the big supper. Cousin Dinky sat with his head in his hands. Uncle Pete patted him on the shoulder. "We'll get her out of those woods, Dinky," he said. "I can promise you that." "Why doesn't the boy drink his cocoa?" said Granny Little. "He needs it for energy." "At least we know where Aunt Lily landed," said Mr. Little. "And that she opened her parachute. It could be worse, Dinky." The glider pilot kept his head in his hands. "If only I could have landed, but the trees were too thick. I'm surprised her parachute didn't get caught in the branches." Cousin Dinky went on. "She's been in that storm since 4 o'clock, and we don't even know if she landed without getting hurt. Have you any idea how fast that wind was blowing?" "It was terrible," said Mr. Little, "and I feel bad that our telephone message got mixed up, and you thought Aunt Lily was needed right away." "We shouldn't have called," said Uncle Pete. "It wasn't an emergency." "Dinky, you should get some rest," said Granny Little. "Flying that glider back and forth until the sun came up, you must be dead tired." "I had to find her," said Cousin Dinky. "You did the right thing, Cousin Dinky," said Mrs. Little. "Did she land near the Specks?" said Tom Little. "The Specks made their home in a tree in the woods. They were wood tinies." "The parachute is southeast of their oak tree," said Cousin Dinky. "The woods there are deeper." "I think we should head for Stubby Speck's tree anyway," said Mr. Little. "He may be able to help us." "Speck stays pretty close to that tree of his in the winter," said Uncle Pete. "I'm sure he does," said Mr. Little, "but he's bound to know more about the woods than we do." "I hate to ask you all to help me," said Cousin Dinky. "Mother may already be... Well, it might be a wild goose chase." "She's all right," said Lucy Little. "Aunt Lily is all right. I know she's all right." "We may face great danger going after her," said Cousin Dinky. Uncle Pete held up his hand. "You're not asking us to help, Dinky," he said. "We're helping. You're part of our family." All the Littles nodded. "I love you, Cousin Dinky," said Lucy Little. She ran to Cousin Dinky and kissed him. "We all love you, Dinky," said Granny Little. Uncle Pete banged his cane on the floor and climbed to his feet. "Come on. Let's get Lily out of those dumb woods and back where she belongs." "I'll find Hildy," said Tom. He ran to the door. "Hold it, boy," said Uncle Pete. "We don't need that cat. She'll only give us trouble." "No, she won't, Uncle Pete," said Tom. "Golly, Hildy will do anything I tell her." "I'm afraid we do need the cat, Uncle Pete," said Mr. Little. "The snow is too deep to walk in. Even with snowshoes, it would be hard going into the woods." "I agree," said Cousin Dinky. "We'll get there much faster riding on the cat, and time is important. We have to hurry." Tom Little ran to find the cat. Mr. Little turned to Uncle Pete. "I think you'd better stay here, Uncle Pete, and look after the women." "What?" roared Uncle Pete. He stood up and pounded his fist on the table. "You want me to stay here with the women?" Mr. Little looked at Mrs. Little. "I don't mean stay with them, Uncle Pete," he said. "I mean stay and take care of them." "Oh, well, that's different," said Uncle Pete. "But you'll need my experience, where the greatest danger is." He shrugged his shoulders. "Let Tom stay. It will be good training for him." "I thought the cat would listen only to Tom," said Cousin Dinky. "I'll tell that cat what to do," said Uncle Pete. "After all, it's just a house pet." "I think you should all go," said Granny Little. "The little women can take care of themselves." "Oh dear," said Mrs. Little. "Do you think so?" "I'm not afraid," said Lucy Little. "I wish Aunt Lily were here," said Mrs. Little. She nodded her head. "I really do. I'm very worried about her." "Why don't you men get going?" said Granny Little. "We'll need Lily here soon."